The following seance took place on July the 16th, 1966, where a sailor by the name of Terry Smith claimed that he had drowned during World War II after the sinking of his ship HMS Hood. He gives a detailed description of what he discovered when he arrived in the spirit world. He is talking to George Woods and Betty Greene, and the medium was Leslie Flint. The following is an edited version of that conversation. Smith: when I first came over, I was sort of bewildered, like a good many more of the chaps do for that matter. It all happened so sudden, and it was every man for himself. None of us really had a chance. It was hopeless. Now it's fantastic because I'm more alive now than I ever was, and I sometimes come back, but I lost interest in coming back. Betty Greene asked him to describe his reactions when he found he was still alive. Smith: the first thing I remember was going up a street. Although it was a real street, in a sense, not the kind of street that I've been used to. It was all very attractive, lovely trees on either side of the road, and lovely houses. I just couldn't make this out at all. I thought, well, I didn't recognise the place, and yet it seemed as if it could have been somewhere, perhaps in California or something, because it was like I'd seen in pictures. A wide boulevard with trees and sloping lawns. It was like a made-up village, but I couldn't make head or tail of it. But I found that there was nobody else about. It was just as if I was all there on my own. I thought, this is odd. I didn't even realise fully I was dead. I thought I was probably dreaming. But the road was not a bit familiar, yet there was something about it that gave me some sort of peculiar inner confidence. I walked along, and there were all these very pretty houses, and it seemed as dead as a dodo. Not a sound, nothing. Then I came further along, and I saw a very sweet lady, a very pretty woman. She couldn't have looked more than about 28, standing at a little gate. It was the first house that I'd seen with a gate, by the way. All the others seemed to have no entrances, no gates. You just walked up the little path to the front door. But this one was at the end, after I walked quite a while, and there was this fence around it. And I thought, well, seems a bit odd, after all, the other houses being free of fences and that. Anyway, this little woman was standing there. She looked young, and yet I felt she was old. It sounds stupid, I know. But she was leaning over this gate, and as I came to her, she sort of smiled. I stopped, and she said, "You looking for something, Sonny?" I thought, blimey. I said, "Yes. I don't know what's happening or where I am." "Oh," she said, "that's all right, Sonny. I've been waiting for you. Come in." So I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose, so I thought I'll go in, so at least it's someone to talk to. And she took me into the front parlour. Nice little room it was, very nice, with chintzy curtains and chairs, and all looked very homely. And there was a cat sitting in one chair, a beautiful black cat, and I thought, can't be dead with cats. She says, "Come on in, Sonny, sit down." So I sat down in the other chair, with no cat in it. She said, "Would you like a drink?" I thought she was going to offer me a cup of tea or something. So I said, "Oh yes, I would, if you please." She said, "Well, what would you like?" So I thought, well, I must go cagey here. I don't want to look as if I drink. So I said, "Oh, I'd like a lemon, please." She says, "Would you? All right." So she goes out and comes back with a glass of lemon. She said, "You've nothing to worry about, Sonny. I've been waiting for you." She said, "Yes." I didn't know what to say. I sat there, and she said, "You're dead." I said, "What?" She said, "You're dead." I said, "Oh, come off it. I can't be dead sitting in a room here with a cat over there and drinking a glass of lemonade. And you're solid and real enough. How can I be dead?" I admit it's all a bit strange. At first I thought I was having a dream or something. She said, "Well, it's no dream, Sonny." She says, "You're dead." I said, "Well, if you say I'm dead, how did I get here?" She said, "Oh, that's all right," she says. "I've been given charge of you." I said, "What do you mean you've been given charge of me?" She said, "Well, when your ship went down," and it suddenly came to me, when the ship went down. The last thing I remember was in the water, holding on to a part of wood. I don't know what part of the ship it was. Anyway, it was a part of wood I was clinging to. Thought it might hold me up, but of course I realised it was hopeless now. Anyway, she said, you drowned, she said. Hundreds and hundreds of lads have come over, and every one of those lads has got someone somewhere to look after them. Some have got their own people, relations or friends. Some have got other souls. I'm one who's in charge of you. You didn't realise, but you were directed. You thought you were walking on your own up the road, but you wasn't. You were being helped by inspiration from a soul whose job it is to help people when they come over suddenly, like you did. Well, don't you worry. You stay with me. I'll look after you. I'll be like your mum. Then she started talking about my people, and it rather shook me because she seemed to know all about my people, about my mum and dad, and how they separated, and about my sister, who was in the Wrens. That's the Women's Royal Naval Service. She seemed to know everything about us. I said, well, are you in any way related to us? She said, well, not really, but it was part of my job to know something about your people, being as how I have to look after you. I said, well, that's funny since you say I've only just come over. How do you know about my lot? She said, oh, well, that's not difficult. It's only a matter of tuning in. Tuning in, I said. Sounds like the wireless. She said, oh, well, we can. If we have any special reason for wanting to know about a particular person or persons, and it's a special work that we have to do, and we've got some sort of connection where that's necessary for us to know things, then we tune in. She said, a little time later, we'll go to see your people. Well, I said, well, that'd be nice. Of course, she said. They'll know that you're dead, but they won't know that you're still alive, that you can sort of watch them or go and see them. Now, you mustn't be too upset if no one takes any notice of you. I said, well, I did have an aunt who was a spiritualist. She said, well, that's good. Perhaps we can get something through in that direction. You never know. We'll have to try her. Well, for the time being, you must try and be content to be here. She said, I've got a son on Earth. I'm hoping one day when he comes over that we should be together again. I expect we shall. But in the meantime, I'm going to look upon you as if you're my son. I'm going to do all I can for you and try to make you happy. And you're not to worry, and you're not to feel alone or anything like that. A little later on, when you're rested, she said, this has been a bit of a shock for you. I'll take you out and you'll be introduced to all sorts of interesting people in our community. I said, oh yes, that's very interesting. Then all of a sudden, during the middle of the conversation, this cat did the most funny thing, I thought. It may sound silly, but it jumped off the chair and it came up to me and it sat on its hind legs and looked up at me and it sort of cocked its ears up and it didn't meow. It didn't make the noise like a cat, but it was just as if the thing spoke. Do you know, I nearly dropped. I was so shaken. She said, don't worry, you'll get used to that. The animals over here have developed, to a great extent, their ability to make themselves understood. Of course, on Earth, in a way, they can do that, but we don't hear them speak because they haven't a language as we understand it. But over here, their thoughts are such that they can sort of vibrate the atmosphere, and you can hear the sounds. And it's merely their thoughts being transmitted to you so that you can hear them. Then this cat said, how are you? And I thought, by Christ, this is quite mad. Cats don't say how are you. And I didn't know what to do or what to say. She said, well, don't worry, you get used to that. Animals are much more sensitive than people realise, and they have their own knowledge of things. They can transmit thoughts, and they pick up thoughts, and you'll get used to the fact that animals can convey a great deal more from this side than they can on Earth. Anyway, I responded to the cat and said, I'm very well, thanks. And then the cat seemed as if it said, well, I hope you'll be happy here. Then the cat went back and sat on the chair and curled up, and as far as I was concerned, it went to sleep. Don't worry, she said. You'll understand that animals have a great capacity of understanding, and over here, they can transmit their thoughts, the same as I can transmit mine to yours, without even the effort of speaking if I want to. You can read my thoughts, and I can read yours. Thought is a real thing for us, and it's very tangible, and that's why animals can communicate by thought force. Gradually, as I got familiar with everything, and a little time later, she took me out on what appeared to be the sun. She told me later that there was no sun, that it was illumination from all of us. All life was able to draw some sort of power, but the illumination didn't seem to cast shadows, although in some places the light did cast shadows. It seemed to me as if everything was pleasantly bright without being harsh, and there didn't seem to be any shadows, and it didn't seem it was necessary to withdraw from the light because the light was so pleasing and pleasant. And it wasn't hot. You didn't feel as if it was burning you. It was a pleasant warmth, a sort of radiance, I suppose. Anyway, I went out with her, and she just pulled the door, and I said, "Well, are you going to lock your door?" "Oh," she said, "there's no need for that here." And much to my surprise, as we went out, the cat got up and walked out and followed us, and was walking along just as it was like you'd expect a dog more than a cat. She's talking away to this cat, and she said, "All right, come along," and she kept calling it Nellie. I thought, well, Nellie's a funny name for a cat. I never heard of a cat called Nellie before, and she must have sensed my thoughts, because I found after a short time that I didn't have to speak to her. She knew what I was thinking. "Oh," she said, "you think it's an odd name for a cat, don't you?" I said, "Well, Nellie, I've never heard of a cat called Nellie. I suppose there's no reason why a cat shouldn't be called Nellie, as well as Tiddles or something." And she said, "Well, Nellie's the name that my mother gave this cat." I said, "Your mother? How old is that cat then?" "Oh," she said, "this cat must be now, judging by material age, about 60-odd years old." I said, 60 years old? I've heard cats having 9 lives," trying to make her laugh. She said, "Well, actually, of course, everybody has many lives. You're having an extension of your life, but you'll find you'll have an extension of this life, and so on ad infinitum." I thought, oh, this is a bit too much for me. She said, "You'll grasp it later. You mustn't think that just because you're dead, that you won't have an extension of life to a degree, whereby you'll eventually be able to extend it into another condition of life." I said, "I don't quite get that." She said, "Well, for the time being, don't let it worry you. You'll find that all life is really an extension of a previous life. In other words, you go on and on ad infinitum. You'll exhaust this plane or this sphere or this condition of life in which you are now. Eventually you'll realize that there's nothing more than you can learn here, or nothing more that's necessary to you here, and you'll feel the urge and the need to extend your experience, and you'll pass into a different existence of a higher sphere or plane, where you'll be able to appreciate and learn and experience all sorts of things that you couldn't possibly experience on this. But that may be a long time yet. There's so much that you've got to experience, so much that you've got to learn. You'll have every opportunity given to you to study and to take an interest in so many different things. If you want to, you can do almost anything, whatever you would like to do or be. When you were on Earth, you were very keen, weren't you, on music?" I said, "How did you know that?" She said, "Well, you were, weren't you?" I said, "Yes, I used to be very keen on the piano, but I was never really good at it." She said, "Well, you'll have every opportunity here, if that's what you want to do, and to be a really first-class pianist." I said, "Well, I can't imagine myself being a great pianist. I like good music, and I used to try." She said, "Oh well, we shall see, won't we? Then later on, when you're more settled, and you're more at home, perhaps we'll see what we can do about it." When I came up the road in the first instance, it seemed as if the place was empty. It was like a dead city, with no one at all, yet everything looked trim and nice and clean and fresh, as if everybody had gone off for an afternoon siesta when I arrived. This time going up the road, it was as if everyone was out, standing at the door, or was coming out to the pathway. I hadn't got very far up the road before I was surrounded by people, all sorts of people, mostly young people. 1 or 2 seemed to be elderly, and yet, looking back on it, I realised they weren't old, but there was something about them that suggested they were aged, and yet they didn't look old. I can't explain that. They were all shaking me by the hand and calling me by my name, and I thought, that's odd. Everyone knows my name. Everyone's calling me Terry, as if they'd known me all their lives. I realised afterwards that there's very little escapes them if a new person coming into the community, or a number of people coming from Earth into that community, which, as I found out afterwards, was a special community, really, of souls whose task it was to help newcomers and to guide them, and especially young people. And with the war on, there was loads of youngsters coming over. They were all around me and making me feel welcome, and I really felt as if I was among old friends. It was extraordinary, yet I didn't know a soul. They all seemed to know me. and I felt quite at home with them. Here I was, arriving in a place where everybody was away, but no one bothered, and now as if they all were coming out to greet me. I thought it was a bit puzzling, so I asked my friend, why is it that when I arrived, no one came to visit me? No one came to meet me or anything? Oh, she said, that was deliberate. Oh, that was very necessary, really. It was partly that you had to, in a subconscious way, for you to come direct to me, and I was the one who was chosen to take care of you. The others knew of your arrival. In every house you passed, you didn't see anyone. Well, their love was so strong that it was helping you, and their thoughts were very real and very tangible. And really, quite frankly, they knew that the right moment would come a little later, once you had adjusted yourself and you've been helped by me to see and to understand a little. Then you'd be more ready to be received by a lot of people. If it had all been there, it would have been too much for you. You just wouldn't have been able to grasp things. It was better that it should be as it was. Now you're settling in, you're getting to know people, and people are getting to know you. And the next thing will be, once you really settle down a bit, define the kind of thing and work you'd like to do. But before that, it may be a very good idea if we go back to Earth and see how your people are, and see if there's anything we can do. She said, it may be very depressing for you, very sad for you, because they don't realise that you're alive, and it will make you unhappy that you can't make contact with them. But you did say that you had an aunt who was interested in spiritualism, so we might be able to do something there, but we'll have to wait and see. George Woods and Betty Greene were able to verify with the British Admiralty that Terry Smith was a sailor who went down on HMS Hood and was lost at sea when it was hit by a shell from the German battleship Bismarck in the North Atlantic on May the 24th, 1941.